Emil, Amok to you. And it's Monday. What an incredible weekend, huh? I mean, it's depressing. It's sad. It's really the state of American racism. Or not all of it racism. I mean, shooting, violence. We don't know everything about some of the shootings that I'm going to talk about today. The big one in Buffalo, definitely that's racism. That's racism. We're going to talk about that. I was hoping that it was just sort of garden variety crazy man with a gun opening fire, but no, this is real. It's definitely not just gun violence. It's gun violence related to hate, to racism, to really domestic terrorism. This is the one-man show that can happen at any time in America. So definitely we'll talk about Buffalo, talk about the column I wrote this morning for the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, aldef.org/blog. You can go there. As I go through this portion of our program, the Lanyap section, as I say, this is the micro talk show of the AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander community. Although you don't have to be AAPI. Sometimes I call us the AAXs, the Asian American X added ethnicity. I'm Asian American Filipino, so the AAFs. You can be in AACH, Asian American Chinese. I mean, it's important to get that ethnicity in there. I noticed during this month, a lot of people are talking about, hey, you know, our umbrella term. The umbrella in our Mai Tai isn't good enough anymore. I mean, this has been an issue for the last few years. What is our umbrella and what is our umbrella drink? I mean, are we drinking Mai Tais? Too much sugar. Well, you shouldn't be really drinking alcohol at all. But, you know, like, I don't want to be like to not, you know, I don't want to appear like I'm not fun, like I wouldn't use alcohol. But actually, you know, I find myself gravitating away from that. Anyway, the umbrella that we use in our umbrella drink, we need a new naming convention. I prefer the AAX. And then, of course, I like the ALL, all the rest of you, because this is really pertaining to everyone, to all of us. On today's show, because I like to talk about all things considerable, all right, we're going to get into Buffalo. We're going to get into why I say those 10 African-American victims could have been Asian American. Because if you're talking about replacement theory, you're not talking about just one ethnicity. You're talking about all the immigrants. You're talking about the entire BIPOC community. Latinx, you're talking about Asians. But this guy was traditional garden variety racist. He had a thing for African Americans. He had a thing for the N-word. It's in his gun, his semi-automatic weapon. So we're going to get into that because it really says where we are in terms of racism in America. We're in a bad place. This is one of the worst race massacres in recent memory, and time to come together on this one. So I'll talk about my ALDEF column, talk about what the GOP is saying to itself, what the leaders, the deposed leaders, Liz Cheney, what she's saying about it, and how she's pointing the finger at the GOP for enabling white supremacy in this country. Then we'll talk about the other shooting in America, the other big one. A man now identified as Asian American, went into a church in Orange County, a Taiwanese church, and was welcomed, then opened fire. If it reminds you of the shooting in South Carolina, where guy comes in, they welcome, and they start shooting. Well, that seems to be a common theme between those two instances, but it really is disheartening because this man was welcome into the community, in the church, and now we have the story about how the pastor, went into action. They hogtied the shooter. We'll talk about that. Unclear about whether it's a hate crime, though, but it's part of the overall just terrible violence that we're experiencing in the month of May, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So we'll talk about all that, and we'll talk about some fun things like Olivia Rodrigo. I did not check out the Billboard Music Awards, although I knew she won 7 awards. Olivia Rodrigo, big fan of hers ever since she won at the Grammys. And I knew this was going to happen, that she was going to be a big winner. But for some reason, I chose to watch American Idol instead, because I figured, well, I'll see who the winners are at the Billboard Music Awards, when the list comes out. And congratulations to Olivia, and congratulations to Drake. But I was more interested to see which of the top, which 3 people would survive the top 5. And I have a favorite, and I'll tell you if she made it. When we talk about American Idol, I still watch American Idol. It reminds me of when growing up, and it was a family show, right? You sit around with your family and you hear the singers, and you try to pick which one is going to be good, and you try to work around the William Hung types. Fortunately, they've kind of gotten off that idea of like making fun of the bad ones, but just like sticking with the really bad ones, like William Hung, like he's the forever bad. In fact, they brought him back for the reunion show, which I took slight offense at that, because why does William Hung have to be the negative stereotype for the bad singer? Why does the bad Asian singer have to be the stereotype? And if this hurts you, if this keeps you Asian Americans out there from going out there and doing karaoke, then I put that at the doorstep of American Idol for saying, making fun of the bad Asian American singer. Although you might say, oh, come on, Emil, get real. They're not making fun of the bad Asian American singer. Well, okay. Look, we'll talk about American Idol. I still watch it. And then we'll talk one thing about the NBA and the Dubs playing the Mavs. The Mavs drubbed the Phoenix Suns in a game that was like almost as big a blowout as the Grizz Warrior game that distressed me the other day, that said, that's it. I'm through with professional sports. As you see, I'm talking about it today, so I'm not totally through with professional sports. But I am looking forward to the Dubs playing the Mavs, because I think it's going to be a pretty good showdown between a person who may be the best person in the league, Luka, right? I mean, a lot of people think the Mavs, Luka Doncic, he's the guy, but it may not be Luka. Is it Stephen Curry? Well, it's not Stephen Curry. Stephen Curry's too old, right? Well, that's the thing. Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson is looking good. That's going to be a great series. Anyway, all that coming up today. NBA idol Olivia Rodrigo, the Filipino American half, but the right half. Her father's Filipino. Very few half Filipinos have the father as the Filipino. It's usually the wife who is the Asian and the father is white. Here, the father is Filipino, Asian, the mother's white. Like my kids. So I'm a big Olivia Rodrigo fan. We'll talk about her. We'll talk about the Orange County shooting. They have identified the shooter. It's an Asian American. It's not clear cut why. If this is a hate crime, it is violence. So you want to separate the two: violence, sheer violence versus sheer violence motivated by hate, which is clearly what happened in Buffalo. And that's what I want to start with here on this show. Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. We're here Monday through Friday live at 2 p.m. Pacific. And thank you for being here. We show up, we take in the news, we meditate on the news, and then we try to understand it. Try to understand the news. Try to understand why the world's so I was going to use an obscene word, but I try to keep things clean here. But it's a sad Monday after the weekend. And as I write on my ALDEF column, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, aldef.org/blog, those Buffalo victims, those 10 Buffalo victims could have easily been Asian American under this idea of replacement theory. And I say this in full sympathy with the African Americans. I mean, that the victims there shot dead on Saturday, shocking racist killing. It was a headline the country didn't need because we have too many of these kind of killings. And surely just in this last month, Asian Americans know about the violence part of this all too well. May is our month. It's Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And from the Chinese delivery worker in Forest Hill, Queens, who was murdered about 2 weeks ago, to the shooting of 3 Korean Americans at a salon in Dallas about a week ago, to this past Sunday shooting of 5 Asian Americans, one of whom has died, at a Taiwanese church service in Laguna Woods, Orange County, California. It's just been a horrible month. And for Asian Americans, we know just how horrible the last 2 years have been. For this amount of violence to come, in May, the month that we celebrate, AANHPI Heritage Month, it's just like, it's agonizing. But I think the sad realization is that we have to realize that the 10 hate crime victims in Buffalo could have easily been 10 Asian Americans. The alleged gunman, 18-year-old Peyton Gendron, had racist anti-black slogans on his semi-automatic weapons. But this isn't just a black and white sort of thing. And even though he said it's been revealed that Gendron was thinking about going to another store, another big superstore. But here's the thing that binds us all, that puts us all in the same boat. Gendron believed in the anti-immigration idea known as the replacement theory. And it's an anti-immigration idea. It's an old conspiratorial belief that is being flogged and promoted by no less than Tucker Carlson and all the other right-wing media folks. But Carlson in particular likes to flog this, and he likes to use his, second by second, minute by minute ratings to see just how much of a needle bounce he gets by mentioning this, and he knows he does, so he mentions it all the time. And the belief is this: that our country's elite politicians are out to replace whites in society by pumping up immigration. And that includes Asians and Hispanics. Asians and Hispanics weren't among the 10 victims on Saturday in Buffalo, but we could have been, because as far as the replacement theory goes, it's all about the immigration. It's all about the people who come in and take jobs. It's all about the people who come in and are used to replace whites. And so who does that put in the crosshairs? But Asians and Hispanics as well. Don't think that, oh, well, this is just a black-white thing. Gendron was white. He didn't like blacks. No. As soon as you mentioned the replacement theory, you are talking about a race, a global race thing. You're talking about anti-Asian, anti-Latino, anti-Hispanic, anti-black, anti-BIPOC. Replacement theory. And replacement theory only makes sense as a racist fantasy to explain a drop in the white population. Racist fantasy, right? But the conspiracy has gained popularity as the census indeed shows the browning of America. Further exacerbated in all the right-wing media like OANN, One America News Network, Newsmax, Fox, as well as on social media. Here's a problem. You say, Emil, that's disinformation, right? Well, it's more like hammering home a falsehood into impressionable, gullible minds. In the case of Gendron, perhaps an unstable mind, because reportedly he was perceived a year ago in high school as having mental issues, evaluated in 21 for a threat. So all this, keep this in mind. I mean, I'm sure you got the latest on what's happening in Buffalo, how they've got this guy in a suicide watch. But keep in mind this as well. A new Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research report that says there's a lot more like Gendron in America than we think. 1 in 3 adults, that's 32%, of Americans believe there's a group trying to replace native-born Americans with immigrants for electoral gains, according to the survey. That's like the chief tenet of replacement theory. The second chief tenet of replacement theory is that immigration is leading to native-born Americans losing economic, political, and cultural influence. Guess what? Another 30% say they believe in that statement. So of those two big ideas, that there's a group of elitists trying to replace native-born Americans with immigrants for electoral gain, and that native-born Americans are losing economic, political, and cultural influence. Those two big ideas, the study shows 1 in 5 Americans, nearly 20%, believe both. The Peyton Gendrons of the world are in this mix. That's what we need to be afraid of. And the number of people in this group around the country is a whole lot bigger than we ever suspected. That was what the people of NORC and the AP who did the survey understood. They didn't know that this fairly extreme view was a much larger segment. You got a third of adults believing in replacement theory, and nearly 20% believing in both major tenets of the conspiracy. This is the foundations of American neo-Nazi belief creeping into the mainstream of American thought. Should you be alarmed? You bet you should be alarmed. This is driving the immigration debate from the political right. And if they become the most vocal dominant force driving that debate, expect a rough ride toward any kind of immigration reform policy. If you talk about raising limits on the numbers, if you're talking about, you talk about the program, right? Getting, those students, getting the dreamers in, giving the dreamers a pathway to citizenship. I mean, this is serious. This survey revealing just how many people used to be under rocks, they're now coming out. And they're coming out under rocks and they're firing. This is the problem. These people, more from the AP NORC survey, 4 in 5 think getting welfare or government benefits is a major reason, major or minor factor on why immigrants come to the U.S. That's going to predispose people to not liking immigration or voting against real immigration reform. Or how about this? 36% of Americans are in favor of restricting the number of immigrants to the U.S., including more than half of all the believers in conspiracy theories like the replacement theory. So just those two things are alarming. You wonder why we haven't had real immigration reform. We haven't had real immigration reform because this is the thought that's been driven into people's heads. And as I said, they come out from under the rocks and they come out guns a-blazing because guess what? All these folks believe in all that plus the Second Amendment and gun rights. And as you heard Professor Dan Gonzalez on this show on Friday say, that intersectionality should scare all of us. Dan is a Asian American history professor, politics professor at San Francisco State's College of Ethnic Studies. Can't be more blunt than that. The intersectionality of replacement theory, conspiracy theories, plus Second Amendment and guns. That little Venn diagram, that's a big loaded Venn diagram. And it proves that Gendron isn't just an isolated case. In other words, you wouldn't have solved the problem in Buffalo had Gendron received help a year ago, because this is bigger than Gendron. There are others, and more than likely, they are armed. They're all throughout the United States. This is American racism in not black and white, in full living color. I mean, as I said, don't think that this is a black-white issue. It's not a black-white issue. This is full living color. Replacement theory is all immigrants coming in replacing whites, and they mean Latinx, they mean Asian Americans, they mean all of us. They mean Afro-Caribbean, they mean you name it. This guy just happens to be, Gendron just happened to be an old-fashioned racist on top of it, which may confuse things. But don't confuse the fact that this is an anti-people of color idea. Totally. Here's a scary thing also. It's more complicated than just giving these people the truth. I mean, if you think, oh, well, it's all disinformation, right? They're getting replacement theory from places like One American News Network and Newsmax and Fox. No, the AP NORC survey said, 45% of the conspiratorial thinkers, people who believe in the core values of replacement theory, they watch One American News. They watch Newsmax. Only 45% of them do. Only 31% watch Fox. That means Fox, they're kind of reasonable, the Fox watchers. On CNN, only 13% watch CNN. Only 11% watch MSNBC. But here's the thing. We're not This isn't about, just putting the truth out there and hoping that things logically work out. Try to win over these conspiracy-minded folks. Because what they found is it's not about these theories. People aren't attracted to the lies and to the theory. They aren't attracted, or they're not attracted to you coming to them and saying, hey, here's the truth. They are attracted to the lies. They're attracted to the theories. They aren't attracted to the truth. Because what you recall what Dan said on the show Friday, what these people, the people who are attracted to conspiracy theories, they do so not because of the theory, but because of their personalities. I mean, the major motivation for this, as you recall what Dan was saying, it's fear. Fear of losing position and power relative to the rest of society. As Dan said, they have no consciousness of what life has been like for people of color for the last 4 centuries. They're worried, as I said, they're worried about the increased competition in fields that used to be whites only, that used to be preserved for whites. And now, hey, you can't just be a dumb white guy anymore, because there are smarter immigrants, smarter minorities coming in and taking your jobs. That's just how things work out. And no one is protecting you except other white supremacists. That's the scary thing. So the real alarming thing is if you try to reason with these folks, like Joe Biden is going to Buffalo tomorrow, and I'm sure he's trying to heal the country. He's trying to be the father, trying to cool us all down and trying to reach out to the white supremacists and trying to bring us all together. That's a good instinct. But that's not what quiets the conspiracy theories. That's not what puts a dent. You can't fight conspiracy theories with truth, because truth doesn't win in that battle, because it's personalities, people's personalities that are attracted to these theories. So what does that mean? It means if we're interested in getting to a solution, we've got to fight this in a psychological, mental health kind of way, because that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a psychological problem. And I think the American Psychological Association put out a statement today. I saw it in my inbox saying, hey, we don't condone racism. People need help. This is how it's not going to be go to the whiteboard and point out the fallacies and the illogic of replacement theory, because people have been doing that for years. It just keeps coming back. 2019, that Christchurch, New Zealand shooting, and it's all kind of like the same sort of thing. Guy down there in Christchurch, New Zealand, put it on live stream, put it on video live stream, right? It's social media. I'm telling you, this is the new racism that's growing throughout the world. It's now really sinking in America. And there was Liz Cheney today. Check out my column. We got to look at the people like Gendron to understand what's really going on in America, to understand this racism that's going on in America. Check out my column on Buffalo victims could have been Asian American under replacement theory. It's on the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog. But I mention this also because, look, Liz Cheney, one of the first, and she's right, one of the first this Republican from Wyoming, to slam House Republican leadership because they were the ones to enable this white nationalism, white supremacy, and anti-Semitism. And believe me, I mean, anti-Semitism was the beginning. You'll recall in Charlottesville, the phrase of the white supremacists was "Jews will not replace us." It was alternated between "Jews will not replace us" and "you will not replace us." This is the far right conspiracy theorists, the racist theorists, and it's what Gendron, the man who is accused of fatally shooting 10 people at the grocery store in Buffalo, it's what he believed in. So Cheney is right to speak out. She was ousted from her role in the House Republican leadership. And I think you also got to blame Elise Stefanik. And here's the sad thing about Elise Stefanik. She took over for Cheney. Elise Stefanik is a fairly moderate white Republican, Harvard educated, but somehow she's misusing her education, misusing her power, because she's adopted this white nationalist stance, or she's adopted enabling the white nationalist, white supremacy stance, as has the entire House leadership, the GOP. Of course, it's led by Kevin McCarthy, who's got a number of problems now. So this is what you have to consider when you think about the Great Replacement. And you got to think about Dylan Roof, 2015, South Carolina. I brought that up. This was in the manifesto of Peyton Gendron. And even though Stefanik, the House Republican leader, who tried to disavow, any connection with enabling Gendron, she called the murders despicable. But the fact is, this really falls on the Republicans' doorstep. They're responsible for this. Well, we can go back further. We can go back to the former twice impeached president of the United States. But Buffalo is a pretty sad situation, because now we got Buffalo, that's weighing on our minds, but we also have the Orange County shooter. They identified the shooter. This was at the Irvine Taiwanese Presbyterian Church in Laguna Woods. They were having a luncheon, and a 68-year-old Las Vegas guy, David Joe, was booked on 1 felony murder charge and 5 felony counts of attempted murder. So killed 1, injured 5 others. That's a change from when I wrote the column, when he just shot, or just had 5 counts. But this is at the Geneva Presbyterian Church, and this Taiwanese Presbyterian Church was holding services there. It's sad. You think of this guy, Joe, coming in. They were having a service or a luncheon honoring Billy Chang, the pastor of the church. And Chang apparently hit the guy in the head with a chair. And then others grabbed the gun. It was all teamwork, right? Others held down Joe, the shooter, wrapped his, hog-tied him with an extension cord. And so there's a lot of bravery and heroism, but it's a bunch of 60-year-olds and 70-year-olds taking action. So this is a sad thing. Now, we don't know exactly why it happened. We just know that Joe was not known to the congregation, but he was welcome. And then this happens. This is the problem. Like there's shooting deaths that are going to be just violence, irrational violence. And we got to accept this. Well, we don't have to accept it. We just have to understand what it is. We have to understand that it is different from Buffalo, which is out and out racism and hatred. So that's why we separate. But I mean, the number of shootings that we need to be concerned about that have gotten to us. I mean, this is one of those Asian American points of violence this month alone. I mentioned the delivery worker in Queens. There were 3 hairstylists in Dallas who were shot within the last week. And then this. And here's the thing. It's happened before. I don't know if we're doing all we can to stop it. But I do know that maybe people will take the Buffalo thing more seriously as soon as they mention hate, because really what we're dealing with is an act of domestic terror. So we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, tomorrow when Biden gets there. But as I said, this has happened before, these acts of violence. And what really does ever happen? There's a lot of talk, but I think the most disheartening thing is if you think, because a lot of people have been talking about disinformation. If you think this is a disinformation thing, and that putting out more information and reaching out and hugging people and doing all that, it's going to change. No, it's not going to change things. You're not going to change things by putting out more truth. In fact, I don't know how you're going to change things. This is a headache for the president because we have a real race problem. And for the most part, we don't want to acknowledge it. But when it hits us in the face like this, just like it did in Christchurch in New Zealand, modern racism on the internet, white supremacy, we got to deal with it as a country. We got to deal with it as, I think, just like some people in South Africa deal with it. I mean, apartheid is, we know it as, segregation. No, but it was codified. There was institutional hate. And people went along and agreed with it. And I fear if we move toward a kind of autocracy, or if we lose our grip on democracy, we might see the opposite of what the conspirators fear. The conspirators feel that politicians, an elite group, is promoting immigration to replace whites. Well, if that replacement theory takes hold, I think we're going to see the opposite. An autocratic response that's so negative and so racist and gets codified instead. I hate to say that, but it could happen if we don't pay attention. It happened in South Africa. What makes you think it can't happen here? The neo-Nazi, the foundations of that thought system are creeping into the American mainstream. The GOP is enabling it, and it should frighten all of you. All right, so let's talk about some fun things. I love Olivia Rodrigo, right? She reminds me of my daughters. Filipino on the father's side, American on the mother's side. She sings like an angel. My kids, they can write like angels. They can't sing very well. One of them can, but they're mostly writers. And I love them for that. But boy, Olivia Rodrigo, 7 Grammys. And here's the thing that's interesting. You know, she wins, let's see, what were the categories? I mean, she's got all these categories that are, I mean, the thing about the Grammy, not the Grammys, but all these music awards, they are so niched. They are so niched that they end up awarding everyone, which kind of makes them, it makes it easy because you don't have to pick between, well, you do, but Taylor Swift wins her country award and Drake wins his award, but there's Olivia Rodrigo winning all her awards in the pop categories. And see, it makes for multiple winners. It just enables capitalism. It's one big popularity contest, one big advertisement for the music industry. But it just shows you the great diversity of America. So as we talk about the racism at the top part of our show, in the music part of the show, we really have to, we gotta honor the fact that in our culture, we can celebrate this great diversity that is here in America. I mean, Olivia Rodrigo, just 16 months after she shoots up to stardom, right, with Driver's License, she was a top winner at the 2022 Billboard Music Awards in Las Vegas. 7 awards. It's one of the strongest. They call it one of the strongest showings by a new artist. And, I did not really know about her until I saw her on the Grammys, right? But she won 7 awards. The R&B group Next won 8 awards in 1998, as did R&B star Ashanti in 2002. Rodrigo wins 7 for her debut album Sour. And I just think it's great. I just wonder how many people understand that she's half Filipino. I wonder how many people are saying, "Oh, she reminds me of Ariana Grande." No. She might, but Ariana Grande is not Filipino. I mean, the other Filipino, Silk Sonics, Bruno Mars, Leave the Door Open, won top R&B song. See, everyone is in their little genre. That's a great thing about music. We're all like niching out. Everyone get a trophy. It's just like soccer. Everyone gets a trophy. Now you got to be good. Although DJ Khaled, he gets, and sheer force of nature, DJ Khaled. What kind of talent does he have? He's just got the talent of force of nature. But this is the thing about music, the great diversity in music. And after such a horrible weekend with the violence in Buffalo and violence in Orange County, if you got a little bit of the Billboard Music Awards on TV, apparently the ratings weren't so hot. But if you saw just a little bit of it, appreciate American music, because American music is full-blown diversity, full-blown getting along. If you hate black people, you don't have American music. If you hate Asians and Hispanics, if you hate you don't have American music. That's just the reality. All right, couple more things. I watched American Idol. That's why I wasn't watching Olivia Rodrigo. I like Olivia Rodrigo, but when I watch American Idol, it reminds me of, being a father, growing up with my kids and watching the early days of that show. And I had a favorite. I mean, here's the thing about Idol. Usually the people who compete are normal looking people, right? I mean, they don't lose the 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds to be idolized until after they win, right? So you look at people like even past winners, over the last, like Jordan Sparks. Oh my God, you see Jordan Sparks in the reunion show? She has transformed herself. And even the other guy, the other big guy, Studdard, Ruben Studdard, used to be huge. And I don't want to bring on this big people bias, because I have friends who are large people and I love them, but we live in a culture that still insists on people going on a diet. And I think we're fighting that a little bit, right? But still, these people on their own, out of their free will, they do it. But this is true when people compete in these shows. Usually they come on some success and then they end up, hey, I'm a star. I got to lose 10 pounds. So American Idol had these contestants like Nicolina, very large woman, great voice. She did not make it through. Hunter Girl, kind of largest, more, fast food Americana. Okay, voice. I mean, I did not like her, but she made it through. The singer that I wanted to make through was Leah Marlene. I thought she was, right? Is that her name, Leah? Leah Marlene. I thought she was great. I've liked her ever since. I liked her because she was sort of like the anti-Idol from Normal, Illinois. And her second song was a killer. First song, not so, when she did with Carrie Underwood, not so great. But the second song was, she made it. And she knocked off Nicolina, who was great. But I think the fans may be fattest. They may say, Nicolina can't be the Idol this year. So it's between Hunter Girl, Leah Marlene, and Noah Thompson. And Noah Thompson is just, he embodies the genreification of music. He is so country, ready-made country, construction worker country. I think he's got a shot. He had COVID. He did well. He sang his best while he had COVID, or while he was positive. So I don't know. I know it's going to happen when it gets to the final next week, but I'm sticking to my guns. I think Leah Marlene should be the American Idol. I hope it's a fun show. It's still fun, and I still like American Idol more than all the other singer shows, despite how they prop up and bring out William Hung, the Asian American bad singer, every now and then, like they did this season. But that's all right. That's all right. I still watch it, and I still watched it over the Billboard Music Awards. All right, one last word. on the NBA. You know, I hated when the Warriors lost to the Grizz by like 39 points. They got really beat down and they didn't show up. And I was offended as a pro sports fan. I said, I don't trust these guys anymore. All right, well, the Warriors are going to be in the the finals of the West. And so are the Mavericks, who beat the pants off the Phoenix Suns. And the Phoenix Suns had a good team. They looked like they were going to win, beat the Mavs, but Mavs have Luka Doncic. And I think he, more than Jokic of Denver, I think Doncic and Stephen Curry are my two favorite dominant NBA players. And here they are. They're in the finals of the West. It should be a good one. I think the Warriors are going to win. I think they're going to show up for this one. Should be interesting because, as I said, Doncic is great. But I'm going to have some split loyalties because I happened to be in Dallas in 1980 when the Dallas Mavericks began. I was there for the first press conferences, when the franchise just kicked off. I just remember how bad that team was. But how people loved them. Hey, they're playing basketball in Dallas at Reunion Arena. And my office is right across the way from a Reunion Arena. I went to a lot of games in the 1980s, that first year, just like I went to games in the 60s when the Warriors came from Philadelphia. So I'm going to have a slight mixed loyalty kind of thing. Although, look, I'm from San Francisco. I'd always be San Franciscan rather than Texan. So it's going to be interesting. Jason Kidd, also the coach for the Mavs. He's a Bay Area guy. It's going to be a fun series. I say Warriors in 7. I said it, Warriors in 7. All right. So that's our show for today. Look, if you're a regular listener, tell your friends. We're on Yahoo. We're on YouTube. My Emil Guillermo Pathetic YouTube channel. We're on Facebook at emilguillermo.media. We're on Twitter at Emil Amok. Just check us out. We're talking about things from an Asian American perspective. And writing my column at the ALDEF, Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, aldef.org/blog. Check out our show 308, because that's where I talk to Daniel Phil Gonzalez about all this replacement theory stuff. It's fascinating, because when we talked about it on Friday, we had no idea that it was going to blow up, and replacement theory is going to be all we talk about over the weekend and today. Tomorrow, of course, Biden goes to Buffalo. I think it's going to be an important moment for American race history, because to use a term that the Biden administration likes to use a lot, this could be an inflection point on American race history. So, regular listeners of our show know that at this point, we usually talk about being meditative, being still, being in the now. So, let's be in the now. Let's think about where we are. And let's try to move forward from the past and just move into the present with full awareness, knowing that we are enough, knowing that we are ready for our moment. You're good enough. If you doubt it, take this hand, put it here, take this hand, put it here, give yourself a squeeze. You're okay. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Back again tomorrow. Check us out on all our little venues. amok.com for the replay. Like us, friend us, follow the algorithm, subscribe, please. Thank you for being here. Until next time, I'm Emil Guillermo. Mahal